I want to welcome everyone to the Elder Abuse, Neglect, and Exploitation webinar hosted by Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County and the Trial Lawyers of Florida. Today is June 15th, 2020, and it is World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Today is the day that we stop and talk about ways that we can end or eliminate abuse for our seniors and vulnerable populations. And so I want to first thank the agencies that fund Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County's work for seniors. That's the Area Agency on Aging, the Office of Florida Attorney General, and Equal Justice Works for their fellowship funding. If you have questions today, there is a little chat box, and if you put a question in the chat box, we will respond to your question either as it comes up or at the end of the webinar. Legal Aid Society is committed to eliminating elder abuse, and so we have a number of programs that help identify and resolve elder abuse for seniors and neglect and exploitation. Our elder law department has a robust program to deal with crimes against seniors and to try to unwind those transactions when we are alerted to them. We also have a domestic violence project that handles injunctions against individuals who perpetrate elder abuse. I have with me here as a co-presenter, Samantha Vasiana. She is the lead partner at Trial Lawyers of Florida. She is the University of Florida College of Law grad. Even though I went to Florida State, we won't hold that against her. She handles personal injury cases, criminal defense, and she's a former domestic violence attorney here at Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County. We want to welcome her and thank her for joining us and co-sponsoring today's webinar. First, I will provide an overview of elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation, and then Ms. Vasiana will go in and talk about how to spot the signs when your loved one is in a nursing home, that they're being abused or neglected, and what to do about it. With coronavirus or COVID-19, many of you are aware that you're not allowed to visit your loved ones in nursing homes or assisted living facilities or hospitals because of the virus. And so usually when you have your eyes and ears and you're able to look in on your loved one, you're able to see a lot of things, and the facility knows that there's someone looking out for your loved one's best interests. So now, with this new paradigm shift, we're gonna have to kind of figure out how we can spot those signs and still be advocates for your loved one. So it's just some misconceptions about seniors, that they have lots of assets. They're looking for claims of quick profits of most of their retirement savings, that they have memory issues or always are wanting company because they're isolated. But we want to learn that, we can't think about these issues as ways that, or think about these issues as things that scammers are actually looking at, and looking at what populations to target. So the term abuse is essentially physical or psychological harm, or depriving someone of goods or services that are necessary so they can meet their needs. And some of the signs of elder abuse are bruises, fractures, wounds, not caring for those wounds or treating those wounds, broken glasses, or just signs of the person's being restrained or punished. 1 in 10 Americans over age 60 have experienced some form of elder abuse. And that's far too many people to have this issue. And we also know that maybe that a lot of this is not reported enough because of fear of retaliation. But 60% of elder abuse cases that are reported are actually perpetrated by people that the senior knows, their family members. So when we think about elder abuse and the perpetrators, it's usually people that are family members, caregivers, either home health caregivers or staff of nursing homes or assisted living facilities. It could be people who are fiduciaries of or trusted individuals, friends and neighbors. When we think about, when we get to exploitation, we'll see that these are people that don't know our seniors, and they are trying to seek their money through lottery scams or things where they gain their confidence and then take their money or identity theft. Emotional abuse is another issue that we find happening to our seniors, where they are being verbally abused, verbal assaults, insults, threats, intimidation, humiliation, and harassment. We also see them isolating them or treating them as infants. And some of this behavior comes out where the person is really agitated, or that the senior becomes emotionally withdrawn, or they have some sort of unusual behavior that develops all of a sudden. And so roughly 54 out of 129 seniors with dementia experience some form of psychological abuse from their caregivers. And that's one of the things that, when we have people taking care of someone with dementia or Alzheimer's, a lot of the programs that are available also allow some sort of respite care for the caregiver, because it is a lot of work to care for someone who has a memory loss impairment. And so Alzheimer's Foundation, every agency, a lot of programs are out there to provide caregivers with that break so that these kind of things don't happen, because it can be an overwhelming job to care for someone with a memory loss issue. Neglect essentially is the failure of a caregiver or someone who has a fiduciary duty to provide the goods and services. And essentially, when we find that seniors are living in homes without running water, that they don't have food, they're not being bathed, they're not being taken care of, they're not getting access to their medicine. These are simply signs that that person is possibly being neglected by their caregiver. So when we have medical reports that someone's dehydrated, or there's malnutrition, or untreated bed sores, or issues with hygiene, where they're not getting their health conditions treated, or they're living in hazardous, unsafe living conditions. So we have, like I said, running water issues, or we have people living in where they're maybe a hoarder. Those are the things where we need to make sure that those reports get made to Adult Protective Services. Exploitation. In an environment such as coronavirus and COVID, and the fact that we're in the state of Florida, exploitation is something that happens every day, and sadly too frequently. And essentially it's the unauthorized taking of people's assets and money for personal benefit. And you'll find that scams, Florida is ground zero for scams, and seniors are part of the best and greatest target. So we usually see exploitation happen when there are changes to someone's will or power of attorney or other advance directives, or when they have unexplained disappearance of chunks of funds or little dribbles. We've had cases where a person uses someone's ATM card and they're taking maybe $100 withdrawal here and there, $100 here and there. But over a 6 or 8 week time, that is adding up, and that is illegally taking someone's assets. We have all types of transferring assets using a power of attorney or misusing a power of attorney. And one of the greatest tools is to teach individuals at banks. They know that this person normally comes in on their own to withdraw money or to handle their business transactions, and all of a sudden they have an escort that comes with them, and who seems to be making kind of decisions or kind of forcing the person to make changes to their account or make withdrawals. We need to depend on the public to help, and when they see these changes, to be able to alert someone that there's something questionable going on. So in one study, the hardest hit age demographic for financial exploitation were individuals between age 70 and 79. They had an average loss of $45,000. The next largest group were people 80 and over who suffered at an average loss of $39,000. So the younger the senior, the less likely that they are being exploited. The higher the age, more likely. So we're going to talk about some solutions to exploitation. One thing that our office does a lot are unlawful detainer cases. And what unlawful detainer is that when A senior has moved in, a grandson, a child, or someone off the street in some cases, and that person will not leave. There's no landlord-tenant relationship. The loved one is this person that's living there hasn't agreed to pay rent or any kind of pay the utilities or anything. They're just living there rent-free. They're couch surfing or living in a spare room. They can't just call the police. Unfortunately, the senior can't just call 911 and say, I want my grandson to move out. Because they've been living there, they have to do what's called an unlawful detainer lawsuit. So in an unlawful detainer lawsuit, our office will send the person who we need to put out a letter giving them 7 to 10 days to vacate the property. If they vacate on their own and take all their things, then the matter is resolved. However, if they don't vacate the property or maybe disappear from the property but don't take their things, we file an unlawful detainer lawsuit. Now, unlawful detainer lawsuit is similar to an eviction, but in an eviction, there is some sort of landlord-tenant relationship. There is some sort of agreement to stay and a provision of money to stay there. In an unlawful detainer case, there's no provision that I'm going to give you money to stay in your place. And so it is similar in the eviction in the sense that it is on a summary procedure. So it is a quick legal process. Usually within 4 to 6 weeks, we can have the person removed from their house. Now, if that person is, creating havoc or injuring or threatening to harm or abuse the senior, then we will also refer the person to get a restraining order to protect them also as another layer of protection. But once the unlawful detainer case is completed, the sheriff's office will serve the judgment and a writ of possession. And so when the writ of possession is served, the person has 24 hours to vacate the property. And at the end of the 24-hour period, then the senior can change the locks and hopefully kind of, get their, rebuild their life and get their life back together. Often, we're having to put out grandchildren or children who maybe have a drug problem or have mental illness. And essentially are making our senior client kind of a prisoner in their own home. We've had clients that they have to lock their bedroom whenever they leave the house because they're scared that the person living with them will take their things or destroy their property. Or we have people who are eating up all the food, so the senior doesn't have food to eat and is unable to take care of themselves. Okay. The third item on here is called ejectment. Ejectment is a third strategy. So the unlawful detainer is you have no landlord-tenant relationship. Eviction you would use if you have a landlord-tenant relationship. And ejectment is the third area where you would use if there's some element that I might have helped you put money down on the house, or I might have had some ownership interest, or I may think I have an ownership interest. I have to then do an ejectment case to have you put out of the property. An ejectment case is in circuit court and takes a little bit longer. So if we can do the unlawful detainer case, we will do that because that is a much quicker process to get a solution for the senior. A power of attorney. And so a power of attorney is an option for a senior who needs maybe some help managing their assets or their funds. And essentially the principal is the person who's authorizing someone to act on their behalf. The agent is the person we are appointing to act on the principal's behalf. If we have a specific power of attorney, then the agent's giving specific authority to do something, like maybe close on a property, buy a property, because a person maybe is out of town or is indisposed for a moment. A durable power of attorney stays in effect until the principal wants it to stay in effect. So the principal can revoke it at some point if they don't feel like they want the power of attorney in effect anymore. Otherwise, it stays in effect. Some problems that we do have with power of attorneys is sometimes they can be misused, and that we want to make sure that the person that we're appointing is someone that the principal trusts and wants to really work on their behalf. Because if there's no oversight over the agent, then the power of attorney can be used as a license to steal. And then at that point, we have to revoke the power of attorney as long as the principal still has capacity. When it gets to the point that the principal doesn't have capacity anymore, then we have to file a guardianship and terminate that person's ability to make decisions for themselves. So that's a very, very last resort that we don't want to do because it does, in fact, the principal's ability to make decisions for themselves. So this chart just goes over again what decision-making powers that the power of attorney has versus and what the things that the agent cannot do. So we want to make sure that the power of attorney doesn't do anything that changes the principal's will or that, transfers property to the agent or someone else. Anything like that we see are warning signs that there is trouble ahead. Speaking of home ownership, often we find trouble when we start seeing clients doing quitclaim deeds or wanting to add people to their property. So we want to make sure that no one's destroying the deed or transferring deeds out of the homeowner's name, the senior's name, without their permission. One good tool that we have in Palm Beach County is a property fraud alert. And the clerk's office is the one that runs the property fraud alert. And essentially it's a short registration, and they will notify you by email if they receive a deed or other home ownership related document that's being filed or recorded in your name. And so it's just kind of a warning shot. Hey, the clerk's office received a document, and then it requires that that person get additional, do some additional work to find out what happened. But at least it's some sort of, alert that there's something going wrong with your property. Guardianship. So guardianship is a process I stated earlier where an individual doesn't have capacity, and then a guardian is appointed to take care of their assets and manage their day-to-day living. Usually it could be a family member or a friend or a professional or a public agency or a private nonprofit organization. For example, Legal Aid Society of Palm Beach County runs a public guardianship program for individuals who do not have family members. And so Legal Aid serves as the court-appointed guardian. Guardians may charge a fee for their services, but the fee must be reasonable and approved by the court. And the guardians are required to keep careful records of their services and time spent. A few years ago, there became kind of a big issue in Palm Beach County where a guardian was accused of misusing the ward's expenses. And so now there's really more examination on the record keeping and the funds that are allowed to be spent by guardians. And the court really takes more of a hands-on role on ensuring that the guardians are not abusing their duty, because they do have a legal duty to act as a fiduciary for their loved one or for their client. And essentially a guardianship, to get a guardianship, you can't just file one and just accuse someone of being incapacitated. There is a process and a step in a court process where the court appoints a examining committee to essentially verify that this person no longer has capacity. And so they'll appoint a doctor, a psychologist or psychiatrist, and a lay person to go out and actually physically see the person and examine that person. And then they file reports with the court reflecting that the person doesn't have capacity or does have capacity. Sometimes we find out when families are feuding, and we have siblings feuding, and more importantly about way mom or dad is living, or the living arrangements, or how someone is using their money, we'll have people filing guardianships and maybe misusing the guardianship process because they want to get control over mom or dad's finances or living arrangements. And so, we have to use the process to kind of ferret out who is essentially in the best interest of the senior or disabled person. So we want to make sure that the guardian never misuses their authority and that they don't exceed their authority or never does anything that self-deals, paying their own bills with the incapacitated person's money or selling their assets that are below market rate to maybe a relative. And we want to make sure that they're not doing anything that's based on a financial motive, that we want to make sure that the guardian is actually looking out for the best interests of the person that they're in charge of. And one just note about nursing home scams as I come to the end is when many people receive their stimulus payments, we heard some reports that nursing homes and assisted living facilities are trying to take those funds. And those funds have been deemed as a tax credit per the CARES Act. And so there's guidance from the Federal Trade Commission that states that tax credits do not count as resources for federal benefit programs like Medicaid, which many people use for nursing home payment. And so that the government can't seize it, and most importantly, that a nursing home or assisted living facility cannot seize it either. And so if you have people that you know of that where they're fighting with the nursing home or assisted living facility who's trying to take their $1,200 stimulus money and use it toward their care, please let us know, because that per the CARES Act is not appropriate use of the funds. And those funds should be going to the senior directly. Recently, about 2 years ago, the Florida legislature enacted Florida Statute 825.1035, which created an injunction for protection against the exploitation of a vulnerable adult. And essentially, this is an ability for the court to then seize and freeze someone's assets when there's an allegation of exploitation. Unfortunately, from what we hear, it's not used frequently. And so we probably need to get the education and market this a little bit better so people know that this law is available and that there is a court action that can be done to stop someone from stealing someone's bank accounts or assets. It is a temporary freeze for 15 days while the court kind of figures things out and sorts it out. I know that our office has only been involved in three of them, three injunctions so far in the 2 years that the law has been enacted. So I think it's a matter of just getting information out to the public and making sure they know if they suspect exploitation, financial exploitation, that this is a method to at least stop it temporarily while the court determines whether the person who's exploiting, allegedly exploiting, has the right to do what they're doing, or they need to be stopped or referred to the police for prosecution. And finally, Adult Protective Services. Department of Children and Families is responsible for Adult Protective Services, and they are responsible for receiving and investigating reports of abuse, neglect, or exploitation. There is a 1-800 number to report elder abuse. You can also report it online. Once the complaint is made, it can be anonymous also. The Department of Children and Families will send out an Adult Protective Service investigator to investigate the allegation and write up a report. If the person is found to need additional services, DCF will arrange those services. It could be home repair, cleaning. If the person's a hoarder, it could be some organization help, or getting them some sort of referral to legal assistance if they need that, or even guardianship or placement out of the house. We've had cases where APS has removed one of our seniors out of someone's care or out of someone's house and put them in an assisted living facility to protect them from the abuser or from the exploiter. So they are a resource and a partner in fighting elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. Okay. So I'm going to turn it over for Ms. Bassiana to go ahead and share her PowerPoint.
Okay. I think I'm still seeing yours, Tequisha.
And I'm trying to figure out. Okay, if I close it.
Aha. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. First, Tequisha, I want to thank you and Legal Aid for having me. I feel like I've come home. Legal Aid will always be one of the best experiences I've ever had as far as employment and as far as the ability to help people. So as Tequisha said, my name is Samantha Valsiana, and I am the lead partner or the managing partner for the Trial Lawyers of Florida. As she also said, we focus on personal injury, criminal defense, and probate law. So today I want to cover really nursing home abuse specifically, although the topic that, or the information I'm going to share can really be related to any kind of caregiver abuse against the elderly. Unfortunately, some of my stuff is going to duplicate what Tequisha already spoke about, but I'm going to try, I'll skip over that as quickly as possible. So let me go ahead right now and share my screen and we can get into it. Tequisha says that the host has disabled participant screen sharing.
Let me figure out how to do that, and I will fix it. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to make you the host, and now you should be able to screen share.
Let's try this. Great. All right, so. All right, are you able to see my screen?
There we go, yes.
Can you see it?
I can see it.
Okay, great. All right, so general, I'm going to go right into the next slide. General evidence of abuse. You can assume that in a
do the slideshow at the top.
Slideshow at the top. Hold on, go home and go slideshow. Okay, and then from the beginning.
There you go.
Okay. All right, so you can assume that an elderly person is being abused if there are changes in personality, frequent tension between the elder and their caregiver, and if you suspect that the elder person is being abused, look for additional signs. And some of the behavior changes that Tequisha spoke about, frequent agitation when a particular caregiver is around, or if the person comes home with you from the nursing home, let's say they come home 1 day a week, they're crying and really upset, they don't want to go back. Sometimes we tend to ignore that, right? Because as people get older, they tend to be sometimes, they have dementia, they're not able to really articulate sometimes what's going on. And so as a result, we kind of sometimes don't downplay it. And in these situations, you really can't. You have to look at everything, listen to what your elder person is saying. They may be just, exaggerating a little bit. That happens, but sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire. And so you have to listen to that and kind of make a judgment call, really. So some signs of physical abuse, and Tequisha went over this, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but having unexplained broken bones, dislocations, or sprains. Yes, elderly people fall and they have very fragile bones and what have you, but sometimes that comes from being pushed, being held down, or what have you. Again, you need to ask questions and investigate everything. Don't take for granted that they just fell on their own. Bruising, scars, welts, failing to take their medication properly, incidents where they go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh, they're taking too much medication. That could be that they're being given that by someone at the facility. Signs of restraint, such as rope marks on the wrist. And, if they say, well, your relative was acting up or was becoming aggressive, then you need to see the documentation of that. They should have created some kind of incident report. They shouldn't just be restraining your loved one because it's difficult and they can't be bothered. Then that's not the field for them. Broken eyeglasses, the refusal of the caregiver to let you be alone with the elderly person. That's a big red flag when someone's always hovering in the room. You should be able to have time with your loved one without someone always hovering. Emotional abuse, again, Tequisha went over this. Unusual behavior in the elderly person that can resemble symptoms of dementia, including mumbling behavior, sucking their thumb, rocking, excessive crying. The excessive crying, you really need to watch out for that, because a lot of times it's not just due to dementia, it's because they're afraid, they don't have anyone or they feel like they don't have anyone. And so this excessive crying all the time, you've got to pay attention to it. And again, it could be related to dementia, but you have to take that extra step and find out. When you witness caregivers belittling, controlling, or threatening behavior, even if they're doing it to someone else, pay attention to that. If you go to visit your loved one and you see a caregiver that's being belittling or threatening or aggressive towards someone else, assume that they're doing that to your relative, right? And assume even that if they're doing that in the public, in the daylight, imagine what they're doing when all the relatives have left and they're left alone. So you want to pay attention, be very cognizant of your surroundings and what's going on as you go to interact with your loved ones. Sexual abuse. Again, you would think that, this doesn't happen, but unfortunately it does. And a lot more than we think or that we know about. So if your relative suddenly has unexplained STDs, sexually transmitted diseases, or other genital infections, you want to pay attention to that. Bruising near the genitals or around the breast, stained, bloody, or torn underwear, pay attention to that. Vaginal or anal bleeding unrelated to like a medical condition. If they didn't have any kind of medical condition like that, again, you want to be cognizant of why is this suddenly happening. Let me stop here for a moment too and say that if you see these signs and you don't have anyone from the facility right then and there to explain it to you, document everything. And if it's on a weekend, let's say, and the owner or the lead person at the facility has gone home or is not available, document everything. Nowadays, you have a very valuable asset. It's called a cell phone. Take a picture of everything, any mark, anything, because if on Monday morning the evidence is removed, you don't really have much. So I would use my phone. I would take pictures. I would record my loved one, whatever they say about what's going on. Be careful though about recording the caregiver or something without their permission, because that's a felony. But your loved one you can record, right? And also you can take pictures and document anything that you see. Signs of caregiver neglect. If they leave your loved one alone in a public location, let's say they go to the market, the supermarket, and they've wandered off somewhere and your loved one's wandering around by themselves. Your loved one's unsuitably dressed for the weather. It is, 90 degrees outside in South Florida and your loved one has on 4 sweaters. That means someone's probably not paying attention. The elderly person is not bathed and they smell, dirty, or they look dirty. They have soiled bed clothing, dirty clothes, bugs or dirty conditions. The presence of bed sores from not turning the patient regularly. And you need to check for that. If your loved one's not mobile and, when you go there, you need to be looking for those things. Having an unusual loss of weight or dehydration. Now, as Tequisha said earlier, because of what's going on with COVID, it's really hard to go in and see some of these things. What I recommend is that you make arrangements with the facility, how you can talk to your loved one by FaceTime, by video conference, or something to that effect. I have a brother-in-law who is in a nursing home in New York. And I remember at the beginning of COVID, every time my husband and I would call, they would say, oh, he's sleeping, or he can't come to the phone. And so we went all the way up to the director and we said, look, we need to be able to talk to him. We need some kind of mechanism. We don't mind if we have to pay for something extra, we will. But this nonsense about, you can't go get him because you're busy or what, it's not working for us. And they actually made accommodations at certain times when we can call and do FaceTime and what have you with him and be able to communicate. So you have to sometimes take that extra step, and you have to sometimes not take no for an answer. Be persistent, be polite, so that you can get what you want to get accomplished. So what do you do if you suspect nursing home abuse? There are quite a few things that you can do. Some of the things that Tequisha told you about earlier, definitely Legal Aid is a great resource and a great facilitator that can help you to navigate your way through some of these issues. Question the nursing home staff, as I said before, regarding any signs of suspected abuse. What you perceive as abuse may not be, and you should be willing to hear the staff out before taking further action. But don't allow them to dismiss you either. It's very easy for them to say, oh, your loved one is acting up all the time, or she has dementia, or he has dementia, or whatever the excuse they may have. It's up to you to ask the questions, and don't go in there and talk to them when you're upset either, because sometimes, if you see your loved one in a particular condition, you may be understandably upset. Wait until you're calm, write down questions, and then go in and have a meeting. And don't also too, when you request that meeting, don't request it like where they're in the middle of a shift change or anything. Make sure that they have time where they're sitting down and actually listening to you and explaining to you what happened. If they're unable or unwilling to explain the situation satisfactory, then you want to look into more formal action. That's where my office comes involved. You would call a lawyer, call my office, and say, listen, we're having this issue, and at that time we'll meet with you and we'll determine a plan of action. It may just take us writing a letter saying we want this, and this, or it may be that we end up filing a lawsuit. It depends. There is a whole variety of things between writing a letter and filing a lawsuit. There's a whole lot in between that can be done. And for anything where you're talking about nursing home neglect or nursing home abuse, you don't have to come out of pocket to pay your lawyer. It's on a contingency fee, just like a car accident would be or a slip and fall. So nursing home management should be willing and able to explain any situation you see as possible abuse and neglect, whether it pertains to your loved one directly or not. In addition to that, many facilities nowadays have cameras on site. So if there is a camera on site or cameras, you would ask for tell them you want to preserve the video, because a lot of business do what's called looping. They will tape over every day's information for the next day, so they don't have to keep buying new stuff. So if that's the case, and even if it isn't, you want to ask them to preserve that particular day incident that you witnessed or that you think may have occurred on camera, so that you may be able to use it later on in a court case if you need to. Speak with your loved one about the situation. Sometimes, as I said, they can't always articulate clearly what's happening to them, but they can point. They will. They can respond in other ways. You may say, did they touch you here? And they may say, or what have you. Ideally, you should speak to that person, your loved one, privately. They're not going to be as forthcoming if the caregiver who's been abusing them is hovering over the situation. If the nursing home management will not allow this for any reason, again, you would contact my office and we would work on getting a court order to make that happen. There's no reason why a nursing home management would prohibit you from speaking to your loved one. But if they come up with whatever reason, COVID or whatever, then we may have to get a court order to make that happen. If you do suspect abuse, report it right away. Seek the advice of an attorney, as we said, who specializes in nursing home abuse. Our office, that's one of the areas we do personal injury, and that's one of the areas that we're really fine-tuned into, perhaps because of my experience at Legal Aid. It's a topic that's very dear to my heart. My mom, she passed away now, but she lived with me as an elderly person. And one of the reasons I would never put her in a nursing home is because I was always afraid of abuse or neglect. And so sometimes You have to put your family members there, and you want to make sure that they're safe. So report any suspected abuse to the authorities. Um, People in the nursing home may be reluctant to speak to you for a number of reasons. They may not want to get fired, or they may be the perpetrator. It just depends. Be nosy. Take notes. A good caregiver won't mind you asking questions as long as you're respectful and reasonable. Take written notes. Write the date. Write the time that you and who you spoke to. Last name, first name, their position. Make sure you don't, because another thing is too, sometimes that person who gave you great information has either been fired because they helped you out, or they've just moved on to another job and now you don't have that information. So ask them, do you mind if I take your cell phone number, and get that kind of information. Anybody else in the nursing home who's willing to speak to you as well, other residents. Now here, management may say you can't talk to other residents, and there's not much you can do about that unless there's litigation going on. All right. Bring the abuse to the attention of the nursing home management. If it isn't taken care of quickly, and again, a good nursing home, they're going to jump on that as soon as they hear any allegation. They're going to investigate. They're going to keep you in the loop. They're going to have a written finding. Look at their policies. Ask them for their policies. What policies do they have when there are allegations of abuse? How is that handled? And you then want to look at that, their internal policy or their standard operating procedure, so that you have an idea. Before I go on to the next portion of the slide, also too, the American Healthcare Association, you can go on their website and you can get a report card of a particular nursing home. So let's say it's Mary Jones Nursing Home. You can look up if they have prior allegations of abuse, and in fact, anything that they've been cited for, safety hazards and all this kind of stuff will be there. But one of the key things it will show if they've ever been cited for prior allegations of abuse. And that I would do before I select a nursing home. But even if you haven't done it then, and that you suspect that there is abuse, I would go ahead and pull that report. It's like a report card that you can look up a nursing home. As long as the nursing home is in Florida, you can find that information. All right, so back to the slide. So call the police if there's clear abuse or imminent danger that the person's going to be in abuse, because at the very least, if the cops say, listen, we don't find any abuse or what have you, or our investigation, at least you've reported it. So that later on, if something were to happen and you're now in trial and the defense lawyer is saying, well, you never reported that, right? You knew a year ago that there were bed sores and what have you. You never reported that, right? You knew a year ago that your mom had a broken arm. You didn't report it, okay? It's better to be safe than sorry. You can call the National Center on Elder Abuse at 1-800-677-1116 if you're not sure who to contact in your area. Also, of course, you can call Legal Aid, which is probably even a better source, because Legal Aid is on a local level and more in touch with the local agencies and different organizations locally. In addition, each nursing home must publicly post the name and telephone number of their local ombudsman. The ombudsman is the individual responsible for ensuring the neglect and abuse that they're investigated in long-term care facilities. If you can't find that number, ask the nursing home administrator or call local law enforcement and they'll provide it for you. I've said already, consult a lawyer if a nursing home resident or your loved one is being abused or neglected. Don't just say, oh, I can't afford a lawyer, because as I said, it's done on a contingency fee basis. If we don't collect any money on your behalf, then you don't pay anything. And not only is your loved one entitled to compensation, you may be entitled to compensation depending on your relationship with him or her. All right, so act now, take action now. Whatever you do, don't adopt a wait and see mindset. And you know, as human beings, we tend to do that, especially again, if our loved ones are suffering from dementia, or if our loved ones can sometimes be particularly difficult. And trust me, having had my mom in my home for 10 years before she passed away, I know that elderly people can sometimes be difficult. And, you know, so but don't do the wait and, well, I'll wait and see what happens. No, take action, start taking notes, start looking at start taking pictures, start looking at the history of the nursing home or healthcare facility to make sure that they don't have a history of this kind of behavior. If you have reason to believe that a nursing home resident, your loved one, is being abused or inadequately cared for, it's better to take action sooner than later. And when I say also abuse, that also includes neglect, as we said earlier. You know, they're dirty, they're not being cared for properly, they're left sitting in their own soil for hours, that kind of thing. So that's basically what you would want to be looking for. Those are the signs that you would want to be looking for, and take some action. Reporting an abuse and neglect is really the only way to put a stop to the nursing home behavior, especially if your loved one is unable to speak up for themselves. You have to be their advocate. And, you know, consulting a lawyer reinforces the seriousness of the behavior and ensures that swift corrective action is taken, and the quality of all the residents at that facility is enhanced by your actions. So not only are you helping your loved ones, you're basically helping everyone in that facility. You're being their advocate and speaking up for them. So basically that covers everything that I want to talk about as far as nursing home neglect. If you do have questions, you can put it in the chat, and Tequisha will let me know and I can answer them for you. Also, the slide that I have up now has my telephone number, 561-288-8366, and my email address, samantha@triallawyerspb.com. Thank you so much, Tequisha, for having me.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you so much for all the good information. Just a final call for anyone who has any questions about any of the material they heard today, or have issues that they want to discuss, please put in the chat box. Legal Aid Society will be having other webinars over the next couple of weeks, as our office is closed to clients currently, but we do want to make sure there's information out in the public regarding landlord-tenant issues, as the eviction moratorium will be ending at the end of this month. So there may be issues regarding landlord-tenant that people have questions about, or housing issues. Domestic violence has seen an increase in the number of calls they're receiving for assistance as people are living and being at home a little bit more often. And so if you do have questions about domestic violence, please make sure that you contact our office. I see there's a question about whether there'll be certificates given out for the training. If you email me, I will make sure that you get a certificate out to you. It looks like there's another question. Can we post the trainings on Eventbrite? I can look into seeing and posting them on Eventbrite if that would be a better platform to advertise the trainings. I can look and see about posting them there. All right. If there are not any more questions, I'll thank you so much, Samantha and Trial Lawyers of Florida, for co-sponsoring today's webinar. And we look forward to working with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.